There is something to be said for boring and stability.
Right?
That's a great way to start off our recording here today.
Right.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. We'll get started here. We've got a bunch of people all popping in at once here. We'll get started here in about 30 seconds or so. Yeah, it's been it's been interesting here now. It's supposed to be 50 degrees outside today in Minnesota, which I know for you, it's like, you probably experience that more often than I do at this time of year anyway. But and then a week ago it was -10.
That's how it was here too. Yeah, we were like 3 below, I think, last Thursday, and then it's been in the 60s. So it's just,
Oh, good for
yeah,
you.
yeah. It gets snow one day, and then it's 60 and sunny the next. So
And so Colorado, right?
yes, ma'am.
So Colorado, when it turns 60 degrees in Colorado, what are people doing and what are people wearing?
It depends on if you're from Colorado and like native, then you're typically in shorts and a t-shirt and you're running around outside, Um, yeah, but it's been crazy outside. Like it's been so beautiful. People are everywhere. It's been good to see people outside and actually getting out and doing things.
Yeah, I was telling people earlier on a call that we were on today that it was 48 yesterday here, which is the warmest it's been in
Yeah.
quite some time. And people were out in shorts and flip-flops, and
Yep.
it's because it feels so good compared to the opposite of what you've had. That
Yep.
usually 45-ish here is kind of like the turning point. It's either 45-ish or April 1st. So on April 1st, I start wearing sandals and flip-flops, and I
Oh,
don't
wow.
care whether there's snow outside or not. It's my
That's
way of
awesome.
boycotting. I've done it
Yeah.
for years. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
kind of how I am with beanies. Every year on my from Halloween to my birthday, I wear beanies, and then once my birthday hits, I switch back to baseball caps.
Yep.
Like all the beanies in my
The things that we do. Well, let's get
Yeah.
started here.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining us today on the last week in mortgage day. We still have a few people filtering in here, but we're going to get going. I was so excited to see your name on the list because, of course, my team coordinates all of their wonderful lender members to participate in this. So I have with me Jesse Lopez, who is the VP of Process Improvement at Mortgage Solutions Financial. I was so excited to see you. It's been a while.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been a minute for sure. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. You're always like a fun guest to have on. I always love to hear like what you've got going on and what's going on in that world. So appreciate your willingness to just kind of like hop in with us here today. And of course, we always want this to be interactive. So for those of you who are on with us today, pop things in the chat. I always love to see that and see what you think. So if there's anything weird, not weird, if there's any traditions that you have, any traditions that you have when the weather takes a turn in your market, tell us what they are and tell us what that temperature is, because I'm not so sure that anybody other than people in Wisconsin would think that 45 degrees was shorts and flip flop appropriate.
Right.
So let us know where you're coming from and what you do in your market. I thought we would start out by talking about something that's been in the news a lot lately. During the week, I tend to not watch the news. On Sundays, I watch a wide variety of news shows just to kind of catch up on what has happened in the world. And I like hearing multiple viewpoints of the same issue. I feel like it gives me a better idea. Oh, Michigan, shorts and flip-flops too. Yeah.
Oh, 65.
Yeah. Yep. Other people flip and called James
Same
Jopia.
James Jopio. He's our secondary manager here at Mortgage Solutions.
That's funny. Yeah. So happy that other people do that too. That makes me feel like I'm part of a network of people that understands that for sure. Um, anyway, lost my train of track talking about what was going on in the news.
Yeah, yeah.
And on Sundays, I watch multiple channels because I don't feel like one just gives you like the real. I want the real story and kind of a balanced thing. So I do that on Sundays usually. So I haven't watched much of the news since Sunday. But on Sunday, it's like they were talking about all of the layoffs, all of the government layoffs
Yeah.
that are happening. So I'm sure many of you have kind of stayed in tune with this, probably have had people that you know impacted by it at this time, or very possibly could have. So CFPB and VA, they ruled, the U.S. District Court ruled this week, what must have been late last week, that labor unions need to file a complaint with the Federal Labor Relations Authority, um, instead of going through the court system, apparently, or in addition to going through the court system. I'm not quite sure how that works. FHA, don't know the number yet, but it's been out in the news at least that 40% of FHA
Mm.
staff could be gone. Same with Ginny, no exact number or percentage, but they have come out and said it may delay some Ginny programs. It made me wonder what happens to Ginny approvals. There are so few of them during the year.
Right.
There was one year there, they only approved 3 lender members. So what happens, what happens with some of those things, and do they get further delayed? And then the most recent one I saw was the HUD Disaster Recovery Office cut by 84%.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so that's like a lot of people. So I'm wondering, like, we've heard rumors of Virginia houses, a bunch of them going on the market in certain markets that, of course, people are
Right.
commuting into some of
Yeah,
those jobs and
vacating.
doing some of those jobs. Have you ever experienced that before, anywhere that you've been, where a market has kind of been, from a housing perspective? Obviously, first ones to sell in that market would be the good place to
Right.
be if you truly plan on selling. Further down the list, if you've got a street that is like kind of wiped out a little bit, maybe not the
Right.
best. Have you ever experienced any of that in your career?
I have not personally, no, and it's interesting, right? Of how that impact could be, and I don't think I've ever experienced it because I don't know that I've ever been in an area or done business in an area where there would be that much impact by a single entity, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And like in this case, obviously the government, it's going to be across the nation, but definitely, as you mentioned, concentrated in Virginia and some of these very heavily government employed cities, if you will. The impact could be dramatic.
Well, and that brings up a really interesting point, because one of the places that I heard was impacted that I wouldn't have even thought of is, apparently there is a very, I don't know where it is in Oklahoma, but somewhere in Oklahoma, there is a community that now has kind of turned the tides of what they were saying before, because it will kind of almost wipe out their town because of one of the agencies that
Oh
was
wow,
essentially shut
I have
down.
not
And
heard
it's
that either. Yeah, that's
somewhere
crazy.
in Oklahoma. I don't remember. I just remember it was Oklahoma and thinking, wow, you don't really think about that. I
Yeah,
myself in my career have only been impacted by that once. I was in the relocation space long ago, in my career, and we worked with Fortune 300 companies that from time to time would shut down facilities. And
yeah.
so there was a facility owned by P&G. It was in Springfield, Massachusetts. And they came in and they thought the people at the Springfield facility thought they were expanding the plant. And instead they came in and
Oh,
shut it down.
close
And
it
we
down.
were like the first people there,
Holy
which
moly.
was a really hard spot to be in. But
Yeah,
it truly, in Springfield, it just had a huge impact on the town after the fact, because just a flood of houses, like all of these neighborhoods were kind of like
right.
wiped out about it. That's the only place that I've ever seen anything like that happen. So hopefully we're not looking at anything like that. Or in
That's
the
crazy.
housing situation, my other thought process was, in the housing situation that we're in currently, does that mean that just a lot of people get to buy houses that haven't been able to find a house, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could be double edged too, though, right? I mean, what's the long term ripple impact, right? I mean, you think about, you're talking thousands upon thousands of people. So now you have people that are not only displaced from an employment perspective, right? I'm sure they'll have packages and things, right? Because they're being laid off, that type of thing. I would suspect, but not only that, you have all these people that are potentially now reentering workforce. You have people that are selling their homes and vacating different areas. But then you look at, even from an industry perspective, what does that do to us when we're trying to close loans? What are those escalations to V? I mean, VA is already usually slow to respond and all of those things as it
Yeah.
is. Now with reduced force, what does that look like, and how does that impact buyers from that particular angle? You look at the CFPB. I think let's just say, I mean, I think that's a good thing, right? Let's see what happens there, and I don't see a lot of that stuff being unwound that they've already done. Maybe long term, not immediate. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what is the ripple impact. I'd love to hear people's thoughts. I mean, especially if you're in kind of in around those areas and you're more seeing thing boots on the ground, right? We're hearing and seeing, at least in my experience, third party, if you will, from the news or from other people, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you don't,
Yeah, it's
I'm
very
not one
interesting.
to judge from like a news headline or anything what really is
Right.
going on.
Right.
Because I hear news a lot of the time about some of the things that we've had going on even here in my town. And it's like, that's really not what's happening. It's like I tend to not believe it. So if there's anybody from any of those areas that have seen a huge impact, yes, we would love to hear from you on like what you're experiencing. Maybe it's just too early too. Maybe that's just the gut reaction of people that
Yep.
they're like, okay, I'm finally out of here and I'm going to sell my house, but it's not on that large scale.
Right.
It did make me wonder about those couple of things, though. Is like, how will it impact that? And maybe it just means that there will be more buyers out there, and more financing done out there. But then, where
Sure.
do those people that are selling those homes? Where do they go? Where are they
Right.
going if they're going to
Right.
leave there?
Probably to Colorado like everybody else.
I was going to ask you about that. If you've seen, like, I mean, I hear from time to time there are different places where, like, it's having those kinds of like California people moving out, but then now I've heard that people are moving from Texas back to California. What has happened in the market that you're in? Have you been inundated by people?
I think in Colorado, especially, I mean, the last couple of years, and it just continues. People just are, and I don't know. I think a lot of native people are leaving Colorado as other people are flooding in. So I don't know what those numbers exactly look like. I just know that we're getting crowded, and I know like here in Colorado Springs, especially, we have traffic now that we never had before. You got all of those things that are all clear signs of growth in and around the city and the state. So
Yeah,
I see so much traffic on back roads and things where you never hardly used to see anybody. So we're definitely growing in population. There's no question.
yeah. Have you noticed it? I know you're a hiker and I know you're like an outdoor person that you love to be outdoors. Have
Yeah.
you noticed anything like related to your environment? Like
Oh,
more
massive.
people out and about?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah, massive. The amount of people that have engaged in outdoor activities like ice fishing and things that you never used to see them. Even going to some of the bodies of water, things like that, you never used to see people, and now it's just they're they're tent city with all the people's huts and stuff out there. So definitely, yeah, I think people are growing more into the outdoors, and I think it's a good thing. I think obviously post COVID, people are now actually getting outside and being active again, and they're not as much of a recluse as we were kind of trained to be over the last couple of years. So I think that also has an impact on it too, right?
Yeah. I think too, it's like there's a different opinion of like what is your home and are you in your home all the time now? Because
Right.
people were in their homes and kind
Yeah.
of, a little bit trapped in them. I know that my daughter and son-in-law went last June. They went and, picked up their dog, took their Jeep, and they headed to Colorado for a month
Yeah.
because they had the flexibility to do so with their work. They could
Right.
easily go wherever they wanted, and as long as they were working, they did. So I think a lot of
Yeah.
people are kind of testing the waters on some of that. I'm a wanderer by nature. I
Right.
do have a son that keeps me here in Minnesota, but if I had my choice, I would be all over the place
Yeah.
myself because I
Well, yeah.
like that.
And I think you're seeing a lot of that too. And I think even, when you look at the younger generations, and you start to look at, even tying it back to our industry, right? And home ownership, things of that nature. I think you are starting to see a lot more wanderers. I think you're starting to see, at least, in my lens and kind of in and around the aspects of the industry that I'm in, I see a lot more people buying, like tiny homes, to the escape that you're talking about, right? They've got really flexible employment, and so they can work from home or remote wherever. And so instead of buying this big traditional single family home, they're buying the little tiny house, and then they're living out of their van part time, and they're going here and they're wandering, as you say. And I
Yeah.
think you're starting to see that. Again, I'll just right here in Colorado. I think you're starting to see a lot of that. You're seeing people buy up, land that they never did before. You're seeing a lot of these little tiny homes pop up, little mini barn dominiums, if you will, and things like that.
Okay.
So I don't know what the long-term impact of the market is on that, but it's also a way to close that affordability gap, right? I mean, the affordability gap right now is just insane. Most
Yeah.
younger folks can't afford. If you're making less than $30 an hour, it's almost impossible to buy a home in
Yeah.
most areas, right?
Yeah.
And so I think you're seeing that shift to some of the tiny home. You're seeing some of those things where it's what they can afford,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and so
That
it works.
shifts
And
us right where we were going. So you just did the greatest
oh,
segue.
nice. I stole your thunder. Is that what you're saying?
That was perfect. Number one, it makes my heart really happy to see that other people do the 50-degree. And in Iowa, in Michigan, um, uh, people on the golf courses apparently don't tend to wear shorts quite yet at 50 in Michigan, but it's nice to see that other parts of the country celebrate the change in weather like we do
Yeah.
here.
Well, and
Um,
50 degrees in Tennessee is different than 50 degrees here in Colorado, right? So I
well,
think
it's
that
all
plays
about
into,
what you're like used to. Negative 10
yeah,
to 50 degrees is like a pretty good swing, you know?
right.
It's like Gen Z buyers, this like leads down the path of what you were talking about. They are proving to be relatively resilient, trying to find not only traditional ways sometimes to buy homes, but non-traditional paths, particularly in the Midwest, which I think is funny because you don't ever see, I mean, typically the Midwest is not setting any trends, whether it be fashion or otherwise. It's like
Right.
just not like that. It's usually a coastal thing.
Yep.
Only 3.1% of Americans under 30 hold a mortgage in the nation's 50 largest metro areas. So in metro areas, that would be
Right.
true. And there is a huge disparity between the people that they make up 20.3% of the adult population, but only 3.1% have a mortgage. So that's
Crazy. Yeah.
quite a swing when you
Yeah.
get into that age bracket. And so there is some of that going on. Highest concentration of young mortgage holders, Indianapolis, Salt Lake City, Cincinnati. Um, but metros like New Orleans, Boston, and San Jose are under 2.5%. So there are like some of those swings. That 2 to
Yeah.
3% at under 30, especially, I mean, I guess under 30 can go down to like, people that are, just in college, out of college, and
Right.
those type of things that are adults too. But like I know I bought my first house when I was 27. Now, we built it and my parents thought we were crazy and that we didn't know what we were doing, but we did. Um, and so you get to that 30 mark and it's like I think it's been delayed somewhat, right? That
Yeah.
percentage would normally be a little bit higher.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors there, right? I think it's the affordability, like we were just talking about. I just feel like, I look at my kids. My oldest is 26, middle one's 25. Oldest one bought his house 5 years ago. Middle one still trying to figure out what he wants to do when he grows up a
Yeah,
few.
exactly.
But as he has looked at purchasing homes, again, you come back to that affordability in today's environment, right? And so while he makes decent money, it's still very challenging, and he's smart in the sense that he doesn't want to be house poor.
Right.
He understands that he doesn't want to get into a $25 a month, $2,500 a month house payment, you know what I mean, and not be able to go do the fun things that he likes to do. And so I think that's just from my lens again, it's kind of what I see with the younger generation. There's that small group, or maybe the percentage that are homeowners that um, they found a way. Parents coached them, guided them, helped them, or they went out on the entrepreneurial route and they made enough money where they can sustain it
They
and
could.
afford it.
Yeah.
And then you have that other demographic of folks that are in college. They're struggling as it is. They're trying to find their way and figure out what they're going to do. And then you see that tribe living, if you will, is what I call it. Right? People are sharing homes, or they don't move out because again, affordability. Who can afford to go and even pay rent? I mean, a struggling college kid, making $20 an hour that can only work 25 to 30 hours a week, there's no way they can afford rent, let alone, to go out and buy a home, at least from my lens. So yeah, I think those are all contributing factors. And I think it comes back to the demographic, but you look at where that growth is. I know Denver was just named one of the top cities of growth, right? But you look at like the north parts of the Denver metro area as it extends into like Boulder, Fort Collins, right? Cyber has become huge out there, right? There's a lot of technology companies and things springing up out there. And so I think those are areas where you will start to see younger generations moving into and that growth from that perspective. But if the metropolitan area doesn't have something like that that's going to attract the youth, then they're not going to buy homes there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing that kind of came out is there's just like a huge generational divide. So, um, Gen Z and older buyers, there's some places where there's like a really big gap. So, on average, under 30-year-old buyers are looking at homes priced at 92,335.
It's crazy.
It's like I would like to know where you could find that because
Yeah.
I don't
Tiny
even
homes.
it's like where do you find that?
Yeah.
Because I don't know where that is. It's 74.9% lower than the 367,681 average sought by buyers that are over 30.
It's
That
crazy.
sounds like a more realistic number. So that kind
Right.
of explains why there's only 3% right there. Because if
Yeah.
you're looking to find, like here in the Twin Cities, there is, I don't know, is there's a home anywhere that's that's around 92,000.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that was 30 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe.
Rural
Um,
Colorado here. I mean, same thing. Rural Colorado, tiny homes, as I mentioned before, manufactured housing, right? Some of those things. But yeah, to find a house in that range, especially here in like the Colorado Springs area, this is not going to happen.
Now, it did not designate that they're trying to buy single family homes. So
Sure.
there could be some of, those types, the type of dwelling could make that difference. Huge gaps in places like Providence, Rhode Island, even Charlotte, North Carolina, which I consider like a town of really a lot of young people are attracted to that town. There's a gap of 80 between 86 and 88% between
Crazy.
older buyers and Gen Z, which is a large percentage. San Francisco, 84.1%. Buffalo, New York, Milwaukee, and Salt Lake City were the smaller price gaps, but those price gaps were still almost 60% or more.
Right. Crazy.
So there still is a big
It's
gap.
almost mind blowing.
It's just that it was smaller, right?
Yeah.
It's still a
Yeah.
huge gap. Um, Gen Z is spend 100. This was a surprising number to me. So Gen Z, if you are renting a home and a Gen Z person, you will spend an average of $145,000 on rent by age 30.
It's insane.
It is, which is why you're finding more people, though. I think you said it before. People are co-buying homes,
Yeah.
which I think makes a very complicated situation if somebody wants out of it. Personally, I could have never imagined doing that unless it was somebody that I was planning on getting married to or something
Sure.
like that.
Sure.
Because I think it makes that situation so complicated, but a lot of people are doing it right now. It's
Mhm.
something that has been in the news. Um, so people are seeking out like other ways in some of these places to make it happen. And it's totally understandable. If you're going to pay $145,000 in rent by the time you're 30 years old,
Same.
like why not try to share that expense and
Right.
minimize it with somebody else
Right. Right.
to try to make it less. Like I said, the Midwest is where Gen Z buyers are. Some are having much greater luck. Des Moines, Iowa, Omaha, Nebraska, make up 21% of home purchase applications. That's the highest in the nation.
That's
Now,
crazy.
I'm from Iowa, so I do happen to know that Des Moines has kind of had a research of some technology companies coming in there too.
Yeah.
And so, that may have an impact in that they're attracting some of those younger buyers. Um,
Right.
I find it hard to believe that it's down in those price ranges because it was always a relatively expensive place to buy, even though people would never think it was, just because of the desire to be in a
Right.
city versus in more of a rural environment. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on with that. But beyond the location of where people are buying, um, some Gen Zers are purchasing homes as single applicants. Nearly 4% of people had co-applicants in 2024. So
Yeah.
there's that trend of buying with somebody else. Co-buyers are often friends or family members, sometimes parents, co-signing loans, which I think we've heard a lot about in the past to help get them into loans.
Yeah.
Parents are doing some of that so that the rent money is at least going to a place
Right.
where when you want to sell, you have some sort of wealth established
Right.
within that home.
And I think on the, like, when you look at the co-applicants, right? You look at like a non-occupying co-borrower, that's something as a lender, we see a lot. We actually see a lot of those transactions. We always kind of have just based on our demographic of borrower, I think, but it's not just the Gen Zers. It's surprising, right? I mean, we see a lot of loans of people in their 30s, 40s, or whatever. And again, I just think it's the affordability of it, right? People just simply can't afford housing in today's environment. And it's
Yeah.
crazy.
So I was out with some girlfriends last night, and there was a woman that was in our group that I had not met before last night. I found out during the conversation that she's 70 years old. Um, and she was talking about how she's going to be moving from a home that is larger into a smaller home. She plans on doing it soon because of a health concern that she has. And she was talking about how even though she's moving from a larger home into a smaller townhome, her son is going to be co-signing with her
Oh,
because
wow.
because financially,
Yeah.
and she was very upfront about, because financially she needed that to happen. And so I
Yeah.
think you're seeing it hit like both ends of the spectrum, right? It's
Absolutely.
like costs have not, or money that people are on fixed incomes has not kept up with the cost of
Absolutely.
living.
Yeah. Well, and then
Um,
you look at, I mean, there's a lot of factors there too, right? I mean, you throw in the cost of medication if you start talking
health,
about more of the,
yeah.
the upper end of age, things of that nature, right? The cost of medication and care has just continues to climb. And so, I mean, it's been several years since my grandfather passed away, but I look back at him, right? And he got something like $1,000 a month in Social Security, and like 900 of it went to medication. You know what I mean? So it's like, obviously they were established, and they were able to survive and do those things, but not everybody can do that, right? And I just
Mm,
don't know. Yeah, and
no.
you throw again, you talk about this all day, all the different factors, but then throw in childcare, right? I mean, who can afford childcare these days? I mean, I truly commend any of those single households out there, right? And parents that are having to, work a full-time job and try to provide for your kids, especially if you have multiple children, younger kids that don't go to, free public school or whatever. And then, as many school days as we have that get canceled because of snow or whatever environment. It's such a burden
Huge
that,
issue within our team.
yeah,
Lately, you'll see them commenting in the chat. Like,
right.
I think that Ohio and Missouri have had way more snow days this year than they typically have.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, and I know like our school, our district that my 17-year-old daughter's in, they just made an announcement that they're not doing snow days anymore. It went back to e-learning because they've had so many days off of just baloney. Like it's just BS the way that anyway, that's a whole nother tangent, right? But certainly back to that whole concept of, again, affordability and what people can and can't afford, again, that the
Yeah.
childcare piece of it, childcare is ridiculous. I mean, I don't know what it is today, but I know even when my kids were little, it was like $1,000 to $1,200 a month. And then you fast forward into today's environment, that's probably more like $1,800 to $2,000 a month. And now you got to try to pay for housing on top of that when you make 25 to $30 an hour. That math just doesn't math. You know what I mean? Like that,
Yeah.
it doesn't compute. So
Yeah. On top of that, I don't know like what you're experiencing there, but I know what I've experienced here in the last month. I know we've been promised that dollars of things are going to go down, but
yeah,
we've had the opposite impact here. Gas prices have went back up. I have to buy 91 gas for my car, so over $4 a gallon,
yeah.
back up. Thank goodness I don't drive a lot of places, so it doesn't have a huge impact on me, but for people that do, it would.
Oh, for sure.
And groceries definitely haven't gone down. I went to the grocery store day before yesterday, and I just about choked when I saw, and I know there's this whole bird flu thing going on. Eggs were $8.29 for a dozen eggs.
Crazy. It's
I
crazy.
just about died. It's like, oh my gosh, $8.29 for eggs. It's just like, so, there obviously are probably some other things that have went down. I'm not just going to use those two
Sure.
things, but it doesn't feel like anything is changing, at least in the very short term. And
Right.
maybe I'm hopeful that it will long term. So
Yeah.
yeah. One of the other things that I just wanted to talk with you about and just kind of get your opinion on like how you see this. Um, DEI DEI and DEI initiatives being like removed and those types of things. Obviously, all of us, I think, in our industry just want for jobs and everything that we have open to find the best candidate that we can to fill that job.
Right.
But I also realize that in some other industries and stuff, the motivation isn't necessarily the same. What do you think about like removing those things that have really, I feel like, been implemented to create a more equal playing field for people versus giving someone an advantage up?
Yeah.
Um, like,
Yeah, it's a
what
tough
is
one.
your opinion on that? It's a hard question to
It
answer. I
is. Yeah. I
know.
mean, it's tough, right? I mean, it's tough because I straddle the fence. I'm going to be honest with you, right? I do kind of straddle the fence a little bit. The intent is there, but I'm not sure the intent gets the desired result, if that kind of makes sense. You
It
know what I
does.
mean? And
Yeah.
so that's where I struggle with it a little bit. And I think again, it's one of those things time will kind of tell, I think, you look at our industry though, and I don't want to say it's a specialized skill set, but it kind of is to a certain degree, especially in specific areas of the industry, right? And so, I just don't know what that impact will be. And I just think time will tell. I'm not, again, I don't know. Maybe I'm skirting the question. I apologize. I don't
No,
want to give an answer. No, it's just tough though.
totally fine. It's a
Yeah,
tough one because
yeah,
there's so many different situations, and I think dependent upon your own experiences, like in what they've been. I have a number of really good female friends that are in the technology space.
right,
And as women, they still, I mean, it's you get paid 67, 68% of what a male peer in the
right,
same thing do. And I know that based on conversations I've had with them, they're really struggling because as women in that space, it was one of the ways that, they're in their late 40s, early 50s. It was one of the ways that they actually got to be able to promote their career and show that they were the best
right.
candidate, whereas they may have been eliminated from that
Yeah,
situation prior. And so I think we've all had some of those experiences, whether, it's, your race or your age or
right.
your, that the fact that you're male versus female. It's a hard topic to talk about
It
without
very
having
much
a
is.
lot of
Yeah.
those emotions
Yeah.
into
Well, and
it
I think it
based on
depends
what
on where
you've
you're looking too,
experienced too.
I think as you mentioned, like on the technology side of things, I mean, that is an area, especially in our industry where I think probably more primarily dominated by males, where then you look at more from an underwriting perspective. I think, at least what I see trending typically is, underwriters are primarily female, processors, those types of roles. So, I mean, it's very interesting. Yeah. I don't, that's why I kind of straddle it. I don't know. I guess time will tell how that shakes out for us, but
Yeah, yeah. I hope that everybody just focuses on like finding that right person that
right.
fits the job and some of those other factors. Wouldn't it be lovely to think that we could do that here in the United States and not
Right.
have any of those other factors
Yeah.
come into play? I grew up in the appraisal space in our business, which at the
Okay.
point that I was in it, it was 95% male,
Sure.
and definitely older male at that point. There were 5 women in leadership roles in appraisal management companies in the United
Oh,
States.
wow.
4 of us still have kept in contact with each
Yeah.
other. We were all at different companies, and we all found each other because we were the only women
Oh,
at
that's
that
crazy.
point in time that was in the space. That's since changed.
Yeah,
So
sure.
hopefully, there's more of that kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
We're
And I think a lot of it's
already
incumbent upon us as leaders, though, as you're going through those hiring practices and things, right? To, you know, I, the corporate world, right, I think has a lot into that, right? And I see the differences of even when I interact with people that work in a very corporate environment versus a smaller company, kind of like a mortgage solutions, where I know like when I interview people, it's more about like, I don't really even care about your skill set, to be honest with you. Are you a good human and are you going to be a good fit for the team? I can teach you mortgage. There's things that I can teach you. You know what I mean? I can't teach you to be a good human. I can instill that and hopefully guide you, right? But
right.
so anyway,
Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree with that. For me, it's always been about does this person have the desire to do the job that's in
yeah,
front of them? Because I think desire like overrides almost anything else. I
absolutely.
have seen some interesting things though. Like there are some companies that they're taking off names off of resumes and anything
Interesting.
that would
Yeah.
be like date driven
Indicative. Yeah.
off of resumes, because really what the core of what you want to look at is having a conversation with that person and
Right.
knowing what their skill set and their experiences have been. So I think some of those
Right.
things are good.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I've always taken the approach. Resumes are all lies anyway. It's all the things we make up to make ourselves look good, right? So I very
Right.
rarely even look at resumes other than for typos and things like that, right? Are
It's
you diligent, right?
yeah,
Uh,
it's kind of like a company giving out a reference. Who's not going to give
yeah,
out a good reference? It's always better if you can get the one behind the scenes from somebody that's worked with them to
absolutely.
find out how it's worked out for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, we are already beyond our time. It always goes by so quick. I absolutely love. Thank you for letting me ask the hard question.
Oh, of
Um,
course. Yeah.
it's like I think it's still is good to talk about it, even if you feel like you're kind of straddling the fences. Like
Yeah.
understanding how that's how other people are feeling too.
Right.
And so I appreciate the fact that you would do that with me.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely. No, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, it's been fun talking to you. Let's not make it as long this next
Right?
time we have to see you. So
Yeah, no, happy to interact anytime. You know me. So my superpower is running my mouth. That's why we always go.
I love it. I love it. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you back here next Tuesday at the
Yeah,
same
appreciate it.
time. Thank you,
Awesome.
Jesse.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Bye.